I'm Joe Duffy, Grandmaster Handicapper and CEO of OffshoreInsiders.com. On this video, we are going to take a look at one of those aspects of sports handicapping that I would often overlook during my early years. Quite often, I get an email from somebody and they'll say, "Why don't you talk about losers? You actually had a losing night last night. Why don't you say it on your promos?" And my response is actually true. Let the losers talk about losers. Winners, we learn from them. Now, what have I learned from the losing selections over the years? Quite a lot. But very high on that list was to never underestimate the importance of spot play. Obviously, when we handicap games, we take a look at the strength and weaknesses, especially in football. We pay some pretty good money for those various scouting services that actually analyze the games and take a look at those strengths and weaknesses. But situational plays are such an important and often overlooked aspect of handicapping. Examples: letdown, look ahead, and sandwich games. Now, for those of you who've been in gambling for a while, you're probably aware what they mean, and they're fairly self-explanatory. A letdown game would be a team coming off a big emotional game, whether it's a big win, whether it's an excruciating loss, maybe it was a game against their hated rival, and conversely, a look ahead is when they're playing a big game coming up. You know, Alabama, the game before they're playing Auburn, or vice versa, team before they're playing their biggest rivalry. Maybe a non-BCS team in football is playing their absolute toughest game of the year, the next game when they're undefeated, etc., etc., etc. A sandwich game means a game is just that. It is sandwiched in between those. And those are just many examples of the type of situations that we put a lot more emphasis on now that I've learned over the years from experience the importance of it. There are some other examples of maybe a letdown. A situation that we really love to ride is if a team is one of the last undefeated teams, maybe they are the last undefeated team in their sport, especially in college football or college basketball. Now, in college football, if a team is undefeated after 8 games, for example, or 9 games, and then they lose, then they hit the road for a tough opponent after that, great spot that we like to fade them. A lot of people falsely think, let's go with good teams off of a loss. Quite the contrary, big bubble burst situation. And then conversely, in college basketball, let's say, it's after the game 15 or even game 12, 13, a team loses their first game of the year, then they hit the road against a quality opponent, we fade them. Now, in reality, we'd like to fade teams off of their first loss late in the year, but we especially heavily weigh it if they're facing a very tough opponent on the road. Another example of a situation that we like to exploit. In the NBA, for example, a team coming off a very difficult road trip, they return home to face a fairly easy opponent. Say the Boston Celtics. They just had a road trip where they played the Spurs, the Mavericks, maybe LA, the 2 LA teams back-to-back, the Clippers and the Lakers, and then they return home as a big favorite against the Cavaliers. Perfect letdown situation. Another great spot play that we would look for and we like to exploit. And one of those many, many examples would be a team playing a weaker non-conference foe right in the middle of the conference schedule. In 2010, during the football season, we saw a situation we just loved. The schedule maker gave us this gift. UAB was playing at Tennessee in football, and Tennessee, that was right between playing Florida and then LSU. They were playing the next week, and then after LSU, they were playing Alabama and Georgia. Schedule makers delight. We even said in the analysis, if this game were played the first game of the year, we wouldn't be having such a big bet on this. Now, I will admit, the schedule maker doesn't give us that many gifts. College football, maybe that easy 5-year. College basketball, you'll see a lot more NBA, etc. But look at the schedule. The schedule maker very often gives us gifts. That's why I hear Joey Bag of Donuts. The squares will say something like, "I saw these 2 teams meet when they played earlier this year. Boston won by 30. They're only laying 11 now. How are they not going to beat them by at least 20 this time?" Well, the situation could be different. And in fact, under that somewhat generic circumstance, that would be a case where the big underdog is seeking revenge. And we've always said that revenge applies most when there is a big underdog trying to avoid another blowout. But in short, the key is don't just look at power rating. That's one of the reasons we love power ratings. We do use them. But there are weaknesses. One of the biggest weaknesses, they do not take into consideration situations and spot play. That is probably in my first 10 or 15 years of handicapping. If I had to relive those years, I would put much more emphasis in spot play and situations, as much in college sports as it is in pros, but it definitely applies in the pros as well. Again, you want all the best sports service plays? They're at offshoreinsiders.com, including from me, Joe Duffy, Senior Handicapper and CEO of offshoreinsiders.com. My picks are all part of God's Tips. You got Stevie Vincent, the Forensic Handicapper. Power of 620 sports services behind every play in the Master Lock Line. Check out the Canadian crew. They are literally the latest sensation to hit the sports handicapping world in quite a few years. All that and more is at offshoreinsiders.com.